Don't be defined by your mistakes, but own them. As long as you own that mistake and learn from it, you're going to grow and you're going to get better, and you're going to be able to use that as a focal point moving forward of, hey, this was a tough time in my life, but I got past it. People have done things much harder than whatever you're doing.
Well, I hear the devil calling, gotta pay him what he's due. I can't stop the dogs of war. I can't stop the dogs of war. See the fields burning. See the fields burning. Well, I see the fields burning, 'cause hell is coming through.
Welcome to the world's greatest leaders podcast. Leaders from all over the world, future leaders from all over the world. I appreciate you taking some time to come and listen to the podcast, taking some time to demonstrate that you're hungry to learn more and to improve yourself as a person, as a leader, as a subordinate, as whatever the case may be. Today, I'm super excited. I'm about to talk to a guy that is probably one of the people that I admire the most that I met throughout my entire my time in the Army. I'm very sad that he's about to leave us, but I'm absolutely grateful that I had a chance to work with this guy, and I learned a lot from him. Like, when I say a lot, I learned like a lot from this guy. But I'm not gonna delay this any longer. You guys are gonna find out. You guys are gonna understand why I think this guy's such a phenomenal soldier, phenomenal paratrooper, phenomenal leader. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce you guys to straight from Wisconsin, Captain Jack Williams. Jack, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me on the show, and I'm very excited to see what we're gonna get out of this. Before we get started into the interview portion, we gotta get warmed up, and I've been doing this every episode, and I totally took this from another podcast.
Okay.
I have no shame of hiding it. It's I'm gonna think about another name, but as of now, it's gonna be called the Mad Minute. I was gonna throw you some questions, probably some pretty hard questions. Some of them you probably have never asked this before, but I'm gonna see what you got and what your answers are gonna be like.
Okay. Sounds good.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite alcoholic beverage? I know it's a wine.
Yeah, I'd probably say Amarone wine. It's from where the 173rd is located. That's where they produce it.
Vicenza?
Yeah, it's damn good.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Inconsistency. So like when people say one thing and do another, or don't do what they say they're gonna do, that's really irks me.
Okay. Yeah, I could agree. Who's your favorite superhero?
Iron Man, because he's like actually possible. He's just really smart. He doesn't have any superpowers. He's just intelligent.
I mean, Batman doesn't have any superpowers either.
He's right up there too. I agree.
What about villain? Who's your favorite villain?
Ooh, favorite villain? I guess the Joker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he's the best of them all. If you could go to a bar with anyone in the world, past or present, have a drink and ask that person one question, who would it be? What would you ask? And what would you be drinking?
Ooh, that is tough. I think I would probably say Dwight Eisenhower. I'm a big Dwight Eisenhower fan. And I would just ask him what went into the decision to delay D-Day and how that worked, because his advisors advised him to delay it, so he did. And then his advisors advised him to delay it again, and then he did not. And he said, no, we're executing. And it obviously worked out pretty well. Mm-hmm. But that was his call to listen to his advisors and then not listen to his advisors. So I'd ask him about that.
And what would you be drinking? And
I'd probably just be drinking like a gin and tonic or something.
What was your first car ever?
A Toyota Solara. It's a piece of crap.
What year was it?
2000. I paid for it myself. I was really like a proud kid in high school.
How much you paid for it?
$5,000.
Damn.
Yeah. I was a I just mowed lawns like crazy until I was 16
Hey,
and paid
you
for it.
mow lawns in the summer and
Yep.
shovel snow in the winter.
Yep, 100%.
If you were chief of staff, what regulation would you add or change?
Let's see. I was chief of staff of the Army.
You can take as long as you want. I'll just edit it out.
Okay. I guess I would just change the boot policy. I think it's ridiculous that we can't buy our own boots because it's so to the individual, you know?
Are you talking about like you have to wear a Coyote brown boot?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like the idea that you can buy better boots that are civilian boots that still look, you know, subdued and look professional. I think
Yeah,
you
you
should be able to
see.
do
I mean, especially if you're in the field. I mean, you see
that. Right.
like special operations guys doing this shit all the time.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. If you're at an airport and an airline gave you a ticket to go anywhere in the world that you want, you can't go home and pack and repack your bags. You can't go home and pick anybody up. You're just right there with whoever you are, whatever bags you have, and you just got to go. I mean, if you think about it, you're already in airports. You already got a packed bag.
Right. I'd say like Australia. If it was going to be by myself, I think Australia would be cool. Do some crazy hiking, and there's some crazy wildfires going on right now. So maybe not right now, but
On the last episode, Colonel Jones said Australia too, I guess.
Really interesting.
What was the hardest school you went through in the Army?
I would say Ranger School was harder, but Jump Master School was more challenging. I think like physically demanding Ranger School was insane, but
So maybe Ranger School was tougher.
yeah. But like Ranger School, all in all, is pretty easy. You just got to put your head down and do what you're told to do and
Keep going.
yeah. But Jump Master School was the most like humbling because it was very, very difficult.
Yeah. Did you pass JMPI first time go?
I did.
Wow.
Well, not JMPI. No, I passed Jump Master first
Okay.
time go. It was third time.
How much? How close were you to getting your star?
Very close. Had we not gone to Turkey, I would have gotten it. So they're the requirements obviously, but like, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the Army, what would you be doing?
I think I would be in some sort of like stock trading job. I'm really interested in math, and I probably would have pursued something like that. I don't think I would have gone to college had I not gone into the Army. And I don't know, I definitely would have found myself doing something with like stocks or something.
Do you have stocks right now?
I do.
I always want to get into that, but I'm not really good with math and yeah.
Sometimes you just got to dive into it and start learning about businesses.
Yeah, you're right. If you had to choose to redo college or Ranger School, what would you pick?
I mean, Ranger School is so much shorter. I had a good time at Ranger School. It sucked, but you develop a lot of good friendships, and it really, like I said, it was physically demanding, but I mean, it wasn't that bad. College is 4 years long. I'm not really an academic type, so I probably.
Oh, you didn't have fun in college?
I mean, I had fun in college.
So you could go to any other college. You can go to like a party school, whatever.
I don't know. I think I just redo Ranger School. I like where I'm at now.
All right. If all jobs paid the same, what would you work with?
I would probably be like a real estate developer and try to create good housing for people, just like people who couldn't afford good housing or good management. I just try to provide housing for people.
What is one skill that you would like to have that you currently don't?
Surfing, going to Hawaii, so gotta learn how to
that.
surf.
Thanks for throwing it in my face. Have you ever felt invincible?
No.
Really?
No, I think everybody. I think the second you start feeling that way, I guess like the way I'm interpreting your question is you know, as a commander or like not necessarily invincible but untouchable or better than people. Once you start feeling that way, I think you've gone wrong. You know.
Well, I mean, is like when I finished my first 18-mile ruck, I was like, damn, I just finished 18 miles. Nothing can kill me now.
Yeah.
And then 5 minutes later, I was back to normal.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I've definitely had some really high highs. I mean, when you have kids, like the birth of your kids is phenomenal. Finishing Ranger School was pretty awesome. Definitely ate a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have done the same if I was in that position. Who would be a movie character that you would play in real life?
I mean, I'd hate to go back to my previous answer, but Iron Man is so badass. I think you got to go with Iron Man.
He is pretty badass, but I think I'd rather Batman.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Batman's like a darker version of Iron Man.
He just knows like every single martial art existence, and he's rich.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What is your greatest failure in life?
Okay, so there's really two ways I think I could answer this question. One is like a very defining failure for me.
Just answer it both ways.
Yeah. So the first one is it seems small, but it was actually pretty impactful in my life. I tried out for my high school basketball team my junior year of college, or my junior year of high school, sorry. And I tried my ass off, and I wasn't super good at basketball, but I tried really hard, right? Like a lot of effort. And my coach brought me in, and the previous year I hadn't tried out or hadn't gone out for basketball. And I just focused on lifting for football. And then my junior year I went out, and he said, if everybody in the team tried as hard as you did, we win state. But we're not going to offer you a position. And to me, that was so crazy. And to be told that as a kid, it's like, hey, you're trying really hard, but you're not good enough. Yeah. And that was really defining, just for my career, my life. Like, I've always been max effort, and I've always appreciated effort. And I've appreciated what people's effort does to an organization, regardless of their potential or whether they're performing. So I think that was a failure, but it was, and I think I look at failure more as growth. I don't like to be defined by negative things that you've done. You just got to look at what you can learn from it and crush it from then on. So I think that would be my most impactful failure.
Okay. If you could possess someone's body for a whole day and do whatever you want, whose body would that be, and what would you do, and why?
I guess I would say Ronnie Coleman, and I would just like do a shit ton of like deadlifts or bicep curls or something. I don't know. He's just a massive individual.
He is out of norm. That man is insane. I know you hate running, but I do know you like rucking.
Yeah.
If you could go on a 12-mile ruck anywhere in the world, where would that ruck be? And you could pick a partner.
I guess I know who I would take. I would take my wife, but she hates rucking. You would take
your wife on a 12-mile ruck?
Yeah.
I think she would divorce you right after.
I'll carry her weight.
Okay.
I'll carry her pack. I think I would say, like, I don't know. I haven't experienced much in South America. I think that would be like what pops into my mind first.
Hike up the mountain, go see the Jesus statue up in Rio.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Quick story. When I went there, my first time ever going there, I was so excited, so pumped to get there, and I get up there and it's just clouds everywhere, and all you can see is his feet, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I was pretty upset. Who could win a fight to the death? Cadet Williams in 2008 or Captain Williams in 2020?
No doubt, me, Captain Williams now. Like,
would any version of you before beat you today?
No, I don't think so. I think during Troop Command, I was in the peak of physical fitness, and I've put on about, I'd say, 10 or 15 pounds from when I was a cadet. And like I said, I'm in as good of shape running and cardio wise as I was as a cadet, but I'm just more of a man, I guess.
Yeah. If you were president and you had the power to pass one thing in Congress with a guaranteed approval, what would you pass?
I think so. The thing that comes to mind right away is what Congress is actually already doing well is they're starting to support military spouses a lot better. Mm-hmm. But I think that could be even more expanded.
Okay.
They're, you know, they're doing things like covering, you know, state, like changing your certifications in different states and stuff. But I think there's plenty more we can do to kind of provide support for families.
Yeah, they do a lot. I think they are literally the support of the everyday soldier.
Exactly.
All right, next question is, if you could call yourself 5 years in the future and ask any question, what would that question be? Told you there's some hard questions.
It is. I would say, you know, right now my wife and I are fully committed to staying in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess 5 years from now, I would want to know, like, is that the right choice? Are you KD complete as a major? Like, how did things go? Because there's so many opportunities, and like, what could you have done to more enable your success or the people's around you success? You know.
Yeah. If you could travel back to anywhere in time and do something different, when would it be and where?
See, my wife always asks me this question, and she always wants to go back, like, you know, really far, and I'm like, no, like, technology and all this stuff is so cool now. Like, I would much rather go forward, but if I had to go back, I think I would, you know, say maybe the 60s, just because it seems like a
fun time,
interesting time where people. And I'm not talking about like the hippie 60s. I'm talking more like the dapper 60s, like the, you know, people wearing suits all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of cool.
That'd be dope. And the last one is, what is the best piece of advice that you can give someone?
I've said it before. I kind of defined my own life and career on this is, don't be defined by your mistakes, but own them and learn from them, and really try to, you know, don't run away from them, or else you won't grow.
All right. And that was the competition of the Mad Minute, and that was a 16-minute long Mad Minute. I swear to God, it gets longer and longer. I think the last one was 14. The one before was, the biggest one was Max's. The first one, I think his was like almost 20 minutes of of answering questions.
We know First Sergeant Pumphrey likes to talk.
Yeah, he does like to talk. All right, I mean, just so the audience can know, who are we talking to? Who am I talking to? And who, like, just tell them about yourself and where you've been, where you from, and etc.
Okay. Captain John Williams. I go by Jack. From Madison, Wisconsin. I've got a beautiful wife and 2 baby girls.
I got a question about that.
Okay.
Is it
about my
bagel
name?
or bagel?
Okay, yeah, it's bagel. I've been known to say bagel a couple times. I think it's.
Is that a Wisconsin thing?
It is not. Wisconsin is like a carry. It's like a super, you know, bagel. But I think my time throughout the Army, I mean, it's been 12 years since I've lived in Wisconsin. I think some sort of influence made me turn to bagel, I guess.
Oh my God. I thought it was Wisconsin when I heard you say it the first time.
No, it's the opposite. I think I'm like running away from my bagel.
So Wisconsin is a big bagel place?
They say bagel. It's like kind of weird. And I don't know if I'm saying it how they would say it, but Wisconsin accent is so weird. My family, if I get a little drunk or if I go back home and hang out with my family for a while, I start carrying my O's and like, oh, don't you know, and stuff like that. I absolutely will.
I'm so thankful that you do not talk like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I lived there my whole life until I was 18, and I haven't lived there since. So,
yeah.
But, yeah. So I have 2 kids, just brand new baby a month ago. I graduated from West Point, did my first time in the Army as a tanker.
What did you major in?
Systems engineering at West Point. And then, like I said, started out as a tank platoon leader, tank executive officer, and then MCCC, and then did an assistant operations officer here at 191 Cav. And then I took command of B Troop, and I just gave up command yesterday.
Yeah. So Jack is leaving us, and it's pretty unfortunate. He was a big role in my time here in the unit. So what made you join the Army and want to be an officer?
Yeah, so both grandparents, my grandpa on my dad's side was enlisted Army. My grandpa on my mom's side was enlisted Navy. They both retired with 30 years in. My dad was an enlisted Marine. Everything about me joining the military, I was going to enlist in the Marine Corps. And my dad was pretty influential.
Everybody goes to the Marine Corps first.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like the first
Oh, yeah.
people
In
we
this
talk to.
unit, there's a lot of former Marines.
Yeah, there is.
But so my dad was pretty influential, though. He realized I was good at math. He realized I had the potential to at least try to go to college. So he never pushed me to do anything. He never said you have to do this sport or you have to do this anything. But he did push me to at least apply to college. And I was talking to my Marine recruiter, and I said, hey, what is this ROTC thing? Like, I think I'm interested in it. And he said, oh, ROTC, that's Reserve Officer Training Corps. You can't go active duty out of ROTC, so you have to enlist in order to go active duty, which is, I don't know if he was completely just wrong or if he's trying to lie to me.
That's wrong as shit right now.
It's completely wrong. But, high school,
You said
junior,
Reserve Officer Training Camp?
Reserve Officer Training Corps. So that's what it stands for, but that's not true. The second part of that is not true.
Oh my god.
So anyway, I took that and I took it as the truth. And I honestly went back. I probably used, I don't know if Google was probably around, but I probably used like askjeeves.com or some shit like that. And I Googled just active duty officer because that was what I was trying to do based on my dad's guidance. And West Point came up and I applied to West Point, didn't apply to any other colleges. And thankfully, I don't know how I got in, but I got in. Everybody who goes there is like, valedictorian of their class and all this BS. I did not have the GPA that I should have had to go to West Point. And somebody saw something. I appreciate whoever was looking down to get me into West Point. But anyway, thankful for that.
That was good. What was a significant moment in your career that made you be the leader that you are today?
Okay, so in no way am I trying to like act like I'm righteous or act like I'm just like all right all the time, because there is times when you need to make hard decisions as a leader. But the time I look back on is my gunner when I was a tank commander was brand new, came up, we were doing the simulator in the tank, and there was one portion in the tank simulator that you could not get past. Like everybody knew you could not actually pass this part, so you just go into the background of the system and basically go past it so you could continue to do the simulator to get ready for gunnery. And he was a new gunner, but he knew that backwards or back route behind to get past that was available. And we tried it a couple times, and then he said like, hey sir, can we just do this and get on with it? And maybe it's stubbornness, or maybe it's just like I wanted to prove that we could do it. But we spent like, I swear, 2 or 3 hours trying to get past this one engagement.
Is so you.
Yeah. And we ended up getting past it, finding out how to do it, and then how to do it the right way. And then he talked to me like 2 years later and said like that was influential to him because it showed that like
there's always a way.
There's always a way, and that like you can't just take the easy way out every time. Like there's if you just put your head down and keep trying, it'll eventually work out. So I think that might, of course that was developed before then, obviously, but I think that's the first time somebody's actually identified that with me and showed and said, hey, this is something you did, and it impacted me. So I think that's.
As an officer, as a platoon leader, you're always gonna have subordinate leaders. Like as a platoon leader, you have the section sergeants, the team leaders, the platoon sergeant, and as a troop commander, you have all of the platoon sergeants, the first sergeant. What is something that you expect from those subordinate leaders?
Yeah, so I think the best thing that subordinate leaders, whether you're an NCO or an officer, is providing support. Now, and I say support for the commander, right? So it's the commander's job to make the decision and to lead the troop or company or whatever that is. But when I say support, I do not by any means mean blind agreeing to whatever they say.
A lot of people do that these days, and it's
Yeah,
very annoying.
and it's a very big difference between just agreeing and support. So if you just agree all the time, inevitably, like, and you know, you'll see commanders that they will eventually get into like decision overload because everything just goes on them. It's like whatever they say, it goes. And I think sometimes commanders have to make too many decisions, and it's just it's not beneficial for the Army. The Army is all about, you know, disciplined initiative and people at lower levels making decisions, but those decisions have to be in support of what the commander is saying or what the commander has put out as his intent. And I think as far as support goes, the last thing is the key with it is, you know, it's not agreeing, but if you don't agree, you need to give the commander options for other things or other routes. An example I always think of is when we were heading out to Sabre Junction last year, and the brigade commander made the call that while we were out in the field prepping for Sabre Junction that we were going to do PT. And I put that out and owned it.
Sabre Junction 19, right?
Yeah, Sabre Junction 19. And, you know, we were kind of in that interim where we weren't at Sabre Junction, but we were still at Camp Bakken, but away from our families and stuff. And he put out that we were doing PT, and I put that out and owned it. And some NCOs came to me and said, "Hey, sir, you know, we had guys that only brought out a pair of PTs or two sets of PTs. So in order to accomplish this, we're going to have to run back to the barracks and get PTs, or we're going to have to do this, or we're going to have to do PT in OCPs." That is what I mean by support. It's, hey, you made this decision, and in order to make this decision, this is the consequences, or this is what we're going to have to give up in order to support that. Whereas some NCOs, other NCOs, you know, came and said, "Well, this is you know, bullshit. How are we supposed to do PT? We don't, you know, not everybody brought PTs, you know, or enough PTs. We didn't." You can see the difference between support and one is, and there's some people, maybe you disagree, but in your support and in describing how to actually execute their decision, you convince them that the decision isn't worth it by letting them know what it's going to cost, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people, whenever we found out about the whole PT situation in Camp Bakken, it was, a lot of people were mad, especially the privates and stuff. I mean, what I did, I just brought Tide Pods, and I just washed my stuff in the shower with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, knowing now that where did that come from, that wasn't like something. I mean, the brigade commander said we're gonna do it. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
Actually.
And if you look back on it, like the fact that we were able to, the brigade commander made the decision for us to have time to do platoon training out there at Camp Bakken.
We did do a lot of that.
And that was a phenomenal time. I mean, it was a 9 or 10 day stretch where platoons just got to train their guys, and that was, you know, as far as I'm concerned, a phenomenal call by the brigade commander. I mean, it was. I got a lot of positive feedback from the platoon saying that was a huge positive.
It was. What I didn't get, I mean, I hope you can clear this out, was there was no problem wearing an IOTV. But why do we have to take out all the plates but just leave the front one?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure somebody made a call with that, and I don't have any explanation for you there.
It was ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, it was weird. That was probably my biggest question of the year. Why are we wearing only one plate?
Right.
What are your plans for the future in the Army? And explain to us, what will you be doing next?
Okay. Well, the plan is to stay in the Army and retire. I don't have any aspirations of becoming like a brigade commander or something crazy like that. But it is normal in a 20-year career to take battalion command. So I'd love to take tactical battalion command of a Cav squadron. I think as an armor officer, there's pretty much two options. You can take an armor battalion or a Cav squadron. I think Cav squadrons nowadays, especially on the heavy side, have an insane amount of firepower. With the addition of a whole tank troop to the cavalry squadron, you've got it's incredible how much firepower they have. So that's pretty cool. Next for me though is I'll be an OC in Hawaii, and then just basically waiting my time out until I head to ILE. So
Head to where?
ILE, it's like ALC for majors.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very jealous for you to go to Hawaii. Yeah. Oh my God. It was such a hard, when I came time to enlist, it was so hard to make that decision. It was either like go to Hawaii and just be on an island, be on the beach and chill out, or go to Campbell and try to chase the deployment. And so I hope I made the good call to go to Campbell.
Yeah. And see, like, if it was a decision of like operational unit, I think I get your decision point, there's a reason I seeked out the 173rd. I definitely, when you're in positions where it's like what the Army calls like KD positions, you definitely want to seek out the unit, whereas when you're in positions where they're more broadening, then you can kind of take into account some of the other factors.
Hey, me and you talked about this before, but obviously there isn't a perfect leader out there. But what for you is like a sergeant or a lieutenant, brand new sergeant, brand new lieutenant? What for you are the key stuff that you want them to be good at?
Yeah, and I think what you're referencing is our conversation about the Command Sergeant Major Schroeder podcast. So I think as far as sergeant goes, I took a lot from that podcast. He is he basically defined each NCO rank by a few words. And if I remember correctly, the sergeant one was train your soldiers, lead by personal example. And I think the third one, inspect. Yeah. So those three things, if you're doing that, you are crushing it as a sergeant. Because first of all, not all sergeants get that. And I think, another thing that we've talked about is, if you're a sergeant and you're doing those three things, that's great. And that's really focused on, getting the mission done and performing professionally. And you're going to train your soldiers and you're going to make sure that they're good at work. But the other side of that coin is something that, honestly, First Sergeant Pumphrey, reinforced with me, and I think is extremely important, is caring about your people. Caring about your people. And I think there's so many ways to define that. But one way I did that as a troop commander is, or at least I heard this, is, do team leaders know how their private is paying for their cell phone bill? And that's such a small question. And it's not, a end all be all. Like if you don't go into work and say, hey, how do you pay for your phone bill? Okay, now I'm a good team leader.
That's not how it works.
Right. But if you know that answer to that question, then you're at least involved with your subordinates enough to know that they don't just care about work. You're also caring about how they're paying their bills, how they're, feeding themselves, how they're living, what their living conditions are like, etc.
Yeah, you're right. The problem with that, the whole cell phone bill situation, people think, oh, it's just a cell phone bill. But let's say you go on a deployment and the private never fixed his stuff and you never checked on it. I mean, you failed Well, he failed himself first off. I mean, you're a man, you're gonna own to your decision, but you could have checked and got on it to make sure it was done properly. And
Exactly.
that's the thing. Some people just want to check. Nobody wants to put in the work. Everybody wants to be. Colonel Brown always says this shit. If you want to everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to do gangster shit. And
Yeah.
this doesn't mean just being a badass and doing that stuff, but it also means taking the rank and owning the rank and make sure your people are squared away.
Right. Yeah.
What was the hardest decision that you made in your military career?
I think, what I would say is hardest decision was probably whether to go infantry or armor.
You have the option to pick?
Yeah. Yep. It's based on OML out of West Point. And I think, West Point pushes combat arms really hard, which is I think the right answer. I think, West Point prepares you pretty well to be a combat arms officer, and it gives you a lot of unique perspectives. But my decision was really between, going infantry or going armor. And I think the reason I chose armor was just because of the wide variety that the armor branch provides. Like I started out as a tanker and I ended up as an airborne reconnaissance troop commander. There's a lot of different things you can do in the armor community, where infantry, of course, you can be on Bradleys or you can be, airborne as well. But I just liked the idea of, being able to
taking a big missile on your truck and just shooting that motherfucker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I hate vehicles. I don't care how much firepower it has. I hate being stuck on a vehicle.
Right.
Do you think that do you think your leadership approach changed compared to when you first took command of a troop / company / battery level element to now?
Yeah, I do. I think there were multiple shifts as I went through troop command. I've always stayed relatively consistent with what I was putting out, but the way I kind of defined success, I read a book called Mindset the week I took command. Colonel Bartholomew's was the brigade commander at the time, and he recommended reading it.
He's a badass.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's like the only person I've seen with a mustard stain on their wings. It's crazy.
Yeah,
and he's also
absolutely
7 foot tall.
Yeah. No, he's phenomenal. He's definitely one of those pedestal leaders that you just you look at him and you're like, all right, I'm gonna follow that guy.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So I read that the first week of command, and I started to. It was really influential, not just for my command, but for my life. And I definitely started looking at command and leading the troop through that lens. So it's about growth. It's about just your mindset looking towards failure and hard work and what you're doing in your life. So that's how I initially started it. And I thought, hey, the key to success is just having a growth mindset. And I pushed that really hard. And then about halfway through, I started realizing that some of the positivity, like the platoons and the people who were really positive, who came to work with a positive attitude, they were doing better. So I started realizing that, hey, a lot of it has to do with positive outlook on life and just being like, hey, I know it sucks. I know nobody likes doing certain things, but hey, I'm going to be positive about it. I'm going to crush it. And then I would say the last third or, towards the end, I realized that kind of what I mentioned earlier in the podcast with support, I realized that was really the key to the troop being successful was NCOs supporting my decisions. And again, I reiterate, it wasn't NCOs agreeing with me at all. Mm-hmm. It was NCOs supporting my decisions with real solutions that were going to work. And the more I reinforced support, the more I was the more I asked for the support, the more they responded, and the more they responded, the more I asked for it. So it was so healthy for the troop. And as I progressed through that, it's not like at the beginning I wasn't asking for my NCO's support, but I made it a point above and beyond what I would normally do, is asking for their feedback and creating that buy-in. And I think the idea of support is how I kind of finished my troop command, and I think that's really what the goal was.
It's cool that you explained what you actually meant by support, because a lot of people, I remember when we were at OAS and it's nothing big, but when we made a decision about the 24-hour or 12-hour shifts, and you just asked for the support when we were like still trying to make that decision. Everybody was just oh, he's throwing his rank at me. He wants us to do it because he's a commander and blah blah blah. And it's cool that you broke that down and explained that, so that way people that are listening, hopefully people that are listening were there and they can understand what you actually meant by you just asked for support.
Right. And that decision specifically, I mean, I asked for more feedback on that decision than probably any decision I've made in my Army career. And it probably mattered the least.
Yeah.
You know, like 12-hour shifts versus 24-hour shifts for guard. Like, you know, there's positives and negatives to both. But, you know, as far as the NCO support, I mean, we looked at the consequences of each side, and you know, NCOs told me, hey, if we make this decision, these are the repercussions. And once we made the decision, NCOs fully, you know, everybody drove on, supported everything, and continued.
So have you ever thought about doing any kind of special operations?
I have, and I don't know. I mean, like, anybody who's thinking about it probably won't like my answer. And part of it is just I didn't go SF, so of course, you know, you anytime you choose to do something, you put in your head like why you didn't do it. But it was during the time you have to choose to go SF as a lieutenant, first lieutenant promotable, before you go to MCCC. And during that time, I was in a tank unit again. And there were two other guys who were infantry officers who were going SF in that unit. And unfortunately, like, they were not stellar performers. They were kind of like just seeking out SF as like a way to, you know, get out of the normal Army. And it was somewhat impactful. Yeah. And, you know, being in this unit, everybody who goes SF, you're like, man, those guys are absolutely phenomenal. But being in my last unit, the two guys that went were like mediocre performers.
Did they get selected? They
did, yeah. And it was just one of those things, kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. And my battalion commander at the time, you know, he basically also just said, like, it's probably not the right choice for what I want to do. And then, of course, you know, family goes into it too. You know, looking back, I don't think SF works astronomical hours, or, you know, their day-to-day when they're home at least isn't that bad, but they do deploy a lot. And it was just something at the time my family was not ready for. So
what was the most rewarding part of being a troop commander?
Just seeing the growth of people around you. I mean, like, seeing privates who ended up being sergeants, seeing, you know, sergeants who, you know, the first NCOER that I signed as a troop commander, as just the reviewer, was a sergeant NCOER, and it was one of the worst NCOERs I've ever read. Meaning not badly written. I'm saying, like, it was trashing this guy, saying that he was not a good NCO. And over the time that I was in troop command, this guy became a reliable staff sergeant, one who did very well and who I absolutely was able to rely on. So, you know,
is he in the troop right now?
I'll leave that out. I'm not gonna say by name, but he definitely, like, that's kind of the what I mean by the growth. I mean, like, people surprise you. The growth people go through in 18 months. I just look around. I'm grateful that I was a part of that. And if I could, if I was even a sliver of that, then I'm happy. I think it's just seeing people get better on their own accord, on how hard they're working, and also the leaders around them supporting them and bringing them up. So
who was someone that you think that like made a mark, like, damn, this guy really got a lot better, or this guy went from good to completely trash?
Okay, so I think the number one example is actually like not a combat arms guy. I think our supply sergeant. When I first got to the unit, our supply systems were kind of broken. Nobody really knew how to do inventories. Nobody really knew how to order things properly or through the right channels. And our supply sergeant was somewhat unreliable. I say somewhat unreliable. He was very hard to work with. And I was lucky to have Lieutenant Brand, who was a phenomenal leader. Yeah, physically fit. I mean, everything. But he was so intelligent. He was the XO when the day I took command. He started as XO. So with his guidance and kind of me steering the ship a bit, but really Lieutenant Brand's follow through, that supply sergeant turned it around. And in the 18 months that I was in command, I mean, there were times when he was on, say, like recovery day or something, and the troop like would be in hysterics, thinking like, oh, we need the supply sergeant here, like, because a lot of stuff relied on him towards the end there, and it's mostly because of his effort, his hard work, and actually the growth that he went through. So if I had to put one example on it, that would be who it was.
What is your advice to junior NCOs and junior lieutenants to become successful? Kind of like put them on the right path.
Right. I would say, understand that caring about soldiers is more important than everything, because your soldiers are who's going to accomplish the mission for you. And that's not to say, the idea of mission first, you're clearing a room and somebody goes down. Of course, you have to clear the room and execute the mission. But the prep for that mission, you got to care about your people, because they are the point. The point of the Army is to develop good people, and of course, it's to win our nation's wars and fight for freedom and all that. But the fact is, a successful Army career is 20 years. So say you're a 19-year-old private, and 20 years later you retire from the Army, you're 39 years old. You still have all of your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, if you're lucky, your 80s, 90s. That's 50 or 60 years that you're impacting the United States outside of the Army. So what I mean by that is, like, as a young leader, put people on the right path. If somebody messes up, don't just completely fuck them down. Figure out how to correct it, and figure out what you can do to make sure that person is buying in. Because if you mess up as a private, say you're really intelligent, you're raring to go, you're super motivated, and you make one little mess up, and your sergeant just comes down on you, in a disrespectful way, or in a way that you just don't understand. That isn't going to help you make decisions to stay in the Army and to continue to put effort towards things, and to continue to fight for whatever organization you're a part of. Now, if you mess up over time, and you're constantly doing the wrong thing, then maybe something like that has to happen, and you got to maybe take a wake up call. But I'd say if your superiors care, And if you as an individual care about your subordinates, you're going to make decisions that help them, and you have to understand what your feedback and how your consequences that you put on them actually affect them in the long run.
All right. So in the Army, you're always in the process of learning. It doesn't matter if you're a brand new private, you've been in the Army for 2 months, or you're a troop commander, or you're a sergeant major that's been in the Army for almost 30 years. You're always learning every day. So, who was someone that had like a big influence on you, and what did you learn from that person?
I would say towards the beginning of my career was my first sergeant, who when I was a platoon leader had a really big impact on me. He was the definition of an expert. As far as tanks go, he was a tank master gunner. He was a extremely professional NCO. The idea of support that we talked about earlier, I mean, he supported all the officers and the rest of the company exactly how a senior NCO should. He was about, I don't know, 250 pounds, just straight muscle. I mean, he was a phenomenal example of what a first sergeant should be. And I deployed, I think about a month after I signed for my tanks and was a platoon leader. And we didn't bring our tanks. So part of that 6-month deployment with no tanks as a tank platoon leader was him basically pulling me into a room on our off time and saying like, hey, these are the acronyms you need to learn. These are the things you need to learn about tanks. And he taught me tanks before I was on tanks. And that was extremely influential. And I think he started me off on a good trajectory, understanding that, technical proficiency as an officer is just as important as your other proficiencies.
Do you know if he's still in the Army?
He is, yeah. Carlton D. Wade. He's a sergeant major now.
D. Wade, not the basketball player. Is there someone that you talk to or something that you do whenever you have a hard decision to make?
Yeah, I do. I mentioned my dad earlier. He was an enlisted Marine. I consistently, when faced with a hard decision, I'll call him up. And he definitely has a phenomenal mind for like decision making and breaking things down and just following through with the right choice. So I consistently call him. And I think, he was an enlisted Marine in the 70s, so he's got a unique perspective, and sometimes he's a little harder than I am. But he offers a great perspective, and really it's less about his experience and more about his just ability to break things down and break decisions down.
Do you have someone that you use as an aspiration?
Yeah, so as far as I think mentorship is really important in the Army. I think finding somebody to emulate and to aspire to be like is really important. I didn't really have I didn't really have that before I came to the 173rd. Some of my senior leaders were really influential, but I didn't really have many immediate supervisors that I thought I could just emulate and everything would be okay. But once I came to the 173rd, I definitely got a lot of those leaders. Major Craig Nelson was the operations officer.
He's another beast.
Yeah, absolutely. He was the S3 when I was the AS3. Phenomenal leader. I've never seen him make the wrong decision. I've never seen him do the wrong thing. But he's still human. He's still, he's just a great leader. He's who I look up to and emulate to work or continue to provide effort towards my strengths. I think he's very in line with what I try to be. But then there's another guy, Major John Bolton. He's a Apache pilot who I met in airborne school. Extremely smart individual, very talented, like strategists. As far as like big Army picture stuff, you know, he's incredibly intelligent, and he kind of is the example for me of like to work on my weaknesses. So it would be like Major Nelson is who I want to be, and it's like he kind of represents my strengths. And Major Bolton is the kind of guy who's like, all right, are you doing Army writing? Are you providing, articles for Armor Magazine? Are you working on the things, the other side of being an officer that I'm not good at? He's the one that kind of forces me to work on that. So my recommendation would be for everyone to kind of look at mentors in that way. You know, find one mentor who's like you, who you can continue to strive to be like, and then find one mentor who's not like you, who can help you work on your weaknesses.
All right. So through my time, ever since when I first joined the Army until today, I believe that being a good leader, you something that is required for you to be is being physically and mentally tough. Our previous squadron commander used to pound that on us all the time, right? Well, for the people that are listening right now, to put them on a path that is to move forward, kind of like the first step in trying to be physically and mentally tough, what is some advice that you give to that person?
All right, so I think the key to being, I mean, physically and mentally tough, I mean, part of it is just how you look at things, and you need to look at like stuff's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like people have done things much harder than whatever you're doing. I think that is at least the way I look at like tough situations. One, I compare it to, hey, there's somebody out there who's working way harder than me, or who's sucking way more than me, or who's hungrier than I am. And then you also have to just kind of compare to your previous experiences. So I think a easy mark on the wall is going to Ranger School. But I don't think that's a prerequisite. I don't think like if you haven't gone to Ranger School, you're not tough. Because there's plenty of tough guys out there who are resilient, who can deal with a lot of stuff, who have not gone to Ranger School. But I think what Ranger School does is it gives you a mark on the wall for the rest of your life. Like it will likely be that nothing is as hard as what Ranger School was as a whole. But I think in order to get there, you need to, and this is, very specific advice, but you need to start rucking once a week. You need to put yourself in positions that are physically and mentally challenging. You need to seek those things out. And once you do that, you'll start to realize that things actually get easier. Because if you go through your life, you've never gone on rucks. Well, the Army's going to make you ruck. And if what the Army is telling you to do is the hardest time that you've ever had, then you're going to not be able to lead from the front. But if you put yourself in positions that are harder than what the Army will ask you to do, then what the Army's saying to do, it'll be easy and you'll be able to lead. And that's kind of the point. You don't want to be in the middle of the pack. You don't want to be sucking. You want to be, hey, this is easy because last week on my own time, I did double this, But it takes effort. It definitely does.
All right, so Jack, working under you, I know that something that you're really big on is doctrine. Whenever it comes to training, whenever it comes to doing rehearsals, whenever it comes to anything, when it comes to developing soldiers, you always go back to doctrine. And as a leader, you make that call. Either we're either going to do it the doctrinal way, or we are going to do whatever the way that makes sense, right? Can we just get a little bit of your intake on that? On why do you think doctrine is so important, and one of the times that you think that we shouldn't go by doctrine? I don't know if that's a.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, let me correct you. And you never worked under me. We worked together. That is how the Army. That is how we all like B Troop, at least as far as I'm concerned, like we all were a team working towards a common goal. So
Absolutely.
you can cut that out if you want, but the idea is that especially in the United States Army, and I think the reason why the United States Army is so successful is because we don't follow doctrine all the time. I mentioned earlier this idea of disciplined initiative. You can do whatever you need to do to accomplish the mission as long as it's disciplined initiative, right? You just don't want to take initiative and go balls to the wall and go straight through the center of the enemy's line. But like, as long as you're mentally thinking about like, hey, does this make sense? Are we going to be successful doing this? It's disciplined initiative. It's really hard to actually follow that. But as far as doctrine, you have to understand the doctrine in order to stray from it. You have to understand the fundamentals of what the blocking and tackling is in order to actually come up with some crazy other option that might not be doctrinally correct, but could end up being okay in the end. So I think an example would be just, I don't know. I mean, look at anything we do out in the field. I mean, there's plenty of things that we, as far as like distance between OPs or what, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. The doctrine can't cover it. But you just have to, you have to strive to understand doctrine to a T, so that way you can stray from it. I mean, there are countless examples of I say countless examples. I don't know if this is actually true, but I've heard that one of the complaints of our enemies in World War II was that we didn't follow our doctrine. It was just like, they don't know what we're going to do because we were, people were making decisions and just fighting the fight. So it's interesting. The Army's perspective on this, right, is that there's three types of learning. There's doctrinal learning that you get from like these courses like basic training, ALC, BLC, all of these times where you go back to the mothership and you learn doctrine and you learn like what the Army's version of your job is. The second one is organizational learning. So when you're actually in a unit, you learn TTPs, you learn the actual experience that's going to lead to you doing well. And then the third is self-learning. So reading books, studying doctrine on your own, studying all these things, doing things like this, like conversations like we're having now, fall into the realm of self-learning. And if you can conquer those three, or at least continue to pursue those three, that's kind of how the Army sees as the best way to progress.
All right. It's all about making that decision on the ground.
Right.
What is your key to success? Like something that you wake up every day, you're like, this is why I'm going to be successful today.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, but I think at least as far as, baseline leadership, I think, I'm not going to comment on like loyalty, duty, all the baseline stuff, but I think a fundamental or something that kind of leads to more like a graduate level leadership is, I think, consistency. I mentioned it earlier. If you're consistent, you enable your subordinates to start making decisions that mimic what you would have made if you were in the room or if you were on the ground with them. And then following that up is supporting those decisions when they make them, whether they were in line or not. So if I make the same decision under the same circumstances every time, then my subordinates will start to understand that that's the right decision. As long as I'm, a good leader, and I guess I'm making the right decision in the first place. But if I make different decisions across the board, then it's hard for my subordinates to mimic those decisions. It's hard for my subordinates to understand why I'm making decisions. So I think consistency leads to that disciplined initiative that I talked about, and it enables everything. If I'm consistent, then my subordinate leaders can then make decisions in my absence. I think a good example is I came back from a training meeting once, and it was late. It was like 18:30 or something. It was pretty late, for the training meeting at least. And the PL or 2 PLs had not released their guys because they were waiting for me to come back and say, yeah, like we can release. That to me was like, that's not in line with anything I've ever said, you know? And, you know, the consistency, I guess I'm bringing up a bad example. Maybe I wasn't consistent enough, but they needed to make the decision. Like, no, Captain Williams has never made the decision to keep guys past a certain time. Let's release. And then when we need to, or we can kind of respond, or we can tell Captain Williams why we did it. And it probably would have been, yeah, that was absolutely the right decision. Please continue to do that in the future. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it is what it is. I think being consistent just enables people to make decisions.
All right. We are almost finished wrapping it up right here. We got one more question, right? And I've been mentioning this every episode that I have someone on. I think this podcast is going to be more directed to people that are struggling with leadership calls, people that are struggling with trying to keep pushing to their objectives every day. They always come up with a burden always comes up, and they're always kind of like losing motivation. But I want to ask you, what is a story or a message that you have to the listeners that are going through a hard time? They're going through they have a burden right now, and they're struggling to make a call on either they should keep going or they should take certain action. So what is a message or a story that you have to them to help them push to the goal or the objective that they have going on right now?
So, without knowing what somebody's going through, nothing is permanent. Okay. You can, especially in the Army, you can respond in a way that saves pretty much anything. As long as you didn't kill somebody or do something that's going to get you arrested or kicked out of the Army, you can absolutely come back from pretty much anything. And if it's outside of the Army, something that's weighing on you, one, you got to figure out whether it's going to be long lasting, and if the Army is something that's right for you. Like what we fall into occasionally is, hey, sometimes staying in the Army is not the right decision. And I don't know if that's what everybody who's listening to this is going to want to hear, but the Army has to be the right choice, or else you're going to be fighting. And if you're not staying in the Army for the right reasons, then you're not going to be helpful to yourself. You're not going to be helpful to your leaders. You're not going to be helpful to your subordinates. But once you realize that the Army is the right call and you want to put the effort into getting past whatever leadership struggle or whatever life struggle you're going through, I think the key is just understanding that it's not, whatever's happening is not permanent. And I go back to that book, The Mindset. Like, you're not defined by your mistakes. You can learn from them, and you're absolutely, like, as long as you own that mistake and learn from it, you're going to grow and you're going to get better, and you're going to be able to use that as a focal point moving forward of, hey, this was a tough time in my life, but I got past it and I learned from it. And I'm not going to do this because that, led me down the wrong path. But so learn from your mistakes, and I think you'll kind of realize how influential that can be.
One thing that I learned from you, of our entire time working together, like you said, was preparation leads to success. Can you just hit on, and you always praise that a lot. You always talked about it every single time we're getting ready to go on a training event. Can you just hit on it real quick on what that means to you and why do you abide it so much?
Yeah, it's interesting how, like, things stick with some people, because that started out as like just a offhand comment, and then I realized that it's so true. Everything about success, whether of course you got to make the decision on the ground and everything, but you can't even make that decision if you're not prepared. So, what we put as far as field, getting ready for the field, it was just going through mentally all the contingencies that could happen and making sure that we had all the equipment, that we had, things prepped, people prepped. The idea of preparation was not just about equipment, though. It was about making sure that we understood, points on the map that were going to be influential before we actually went out. So we weren't figuring it out once we were in the middle of the mission. The idea of planning and making sure that the op order was not just something that you listen to and then throw out and don't really care about it. It was relevant information that people could use. Now, I say that as the troop commander. I don't know if I hope it got down to the lowest levels and people understood at the level of execution of what the bigger picture was. But putting effort into the plan and putting effort into preparing is what I saw as leading to the most success. I mean, you look at like the sections who rehearsed ahead of time for section live fire did much better than the ones that, well, let me be specific. So the ones that rehearsed how to do things instead of the ones that rehearsed what to do and where to go did much better. So we look at, hey, did you rehearse on telling the gunner which hill to occupy, or which berm to get behind, or which tree to use cover for? Or did you rehearse, that gunner listening to the AG or listening to the section sergeant and taking commands? Because inevitably, we're not going to have a chance to go through a real live fire multiple times, right? So you need to rehearse the things that provide flexibility instead of just providing, hey, I'm going to rehearse going to this because that's what they told me that was the right choice. So as far as preparation goes, you need to make sure you're preparing and rehearsing the right way. But yeah, I think it does help. I think the more preparation you can put into something, the better it is. You just got to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Preparation leads to success. All right. We're closing it up right now. Listeners, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us and listening to some stuff and getting better just by listening to the podcast. Jack, I appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me and share some stuff to the listeners to help them improve and get better. I wish you and your family the best of luck in Hawaii, although I'm very jealous. But I wish you guys the best, and I wish you the biggest of all the successes you could ever have.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I've got a little gift for you, partly for this, but also just a little going away gift for me, leaving the troop. I mentioned it. I got this book, Mindset, so I wanted to give it to you. I appreciate what you did for the troop. And, I think that book hopefully can impact you the same way it impacted me. But I appreciate what you're doing, what you've done for the troop. But this podcast alone just shows that you understand kind of the idea of the professional or the way you
Remember, leadership is talked a lot, but not talked enough. Preparation leads to success.
Well, I feel the river rising, devils coming up for you. I
Thanks for listening. This was the World's Greatest Podcast.